Consumers want to know the facts about the products they buy. But America's agriculture landscape is not easy to navigate. Between different companies, scientific advancement, government regulations, advertising campaigns, and an unhealthy amount of myth and misconception, anyone would be hard-pressed to make sense of it. That's where Real Ag comes in. From the producers who make your food to the store where you buy the final product and everything in between. This is Real Ag. Thanks to the 2018 U.S. Farm Bill, many states in the U.S. are legalizing industrial hemp as an agricultural product. A close relative to marijuana, industrial hemp has been illegal to grow in much of the United States until recently. Currently being grown as a source of the popular CBD oil, industrial hemp can be grown for many other purposes, including fiber for fabric, food, paper, and biodegradable plastics. With fiber as strong as steel, some have even built buildings out of industrial hemp. We will discuss industrial hemp on this episode of Real Ag. Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from
the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.
Over 1,500 acres have been licensed to grow industrial hemp in Kansas, most of it being grown outdoors, with some indoor and greenhouse operations. Most of industrial hemp is dedicated to the production of CBD oil. South Bend Industrial Hemp, also known as Circle K Farming, is one such farm that has dedicated some of their farm to industrial hemp. So, how did they decide to transition some of their land to growing this crop?
So in 2019, my husband actually came to me and talked about how his brother and him were interested in growing hemp, and if I was interested in joining them with this new adventure. I was a little apprehensive at first. I really didn't know that much about hemp, and so I was like, let me do some reading, let me figure out a little bit more about this crop. And the more I started reading, the more I was excited and became passionate about the potentials of what this crop can do in terms of sustainability and the products that can be produced for the consumer, as well as the potential of the cash crop for the farmer.
We were really just looking for different crops and different ideas on the farm, and with the Farm Bill changing a few years ago and stuff, we're reading and researching and looked at the potential and kind of got some true numbers from some people that have been in the industry, and we took a very small step. It was not a huge gamble. We didn't do anything we couldn't afford to make a mistake on if it didn't work, but last year was a really small step, and this year we stepped it up a little bit with this half a circle of irrigated industrial hemp for the tri-crop. That was the thing we thought was the best, was to get the most output in one crop that we could, so this will actually get 3, potentially 4 uses out of this crop. We just really did a lot of research and studying on what we thought was a great idea, and we hope it is, but in the end it's really a little bit of a gamble, and we're pretty sure it's going to pay off. We're pretty excited about it. Obviously we know farming is very tight these days, but really in the industry you're just always kind of looking to change things or improve things. Maybe the saying, if you're not growing, you're dying, but we were just really looking for options, and it's really something that's more than just farming. Our journey is really about improving things and making some better options, I guess. The industry in a whole is really driven by improving what we have or subsidizing certain things and making a better environment.
Growing industrial hemp can be a risky undertaking, as there is no insurance for the crop as of yet, and there are few production facilities in Kansas available to manufacture it into a useful product for purchase. What have other agricultural experts seen in the development of industrial hemp over the last few years?
Industrial hemp is relatively new, and it's a very interesting crop because obviously there were regulatory issues that prevented us from growing it in the past. Now that some of that regulatory environment has changed, that's enabled us to think differently about this crop. There are still challenges with respect to the different levels of tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, which is the hallucinogenic chemical produced naturally in marijuana plants, which is a close cousin to hemp. And it's that THC that can begin to appear at various crop stages of hemp or in certain varietals of hemp that we have to be careful with, the growers have to be careful with. And unfortunately, policy says above a certain percentage, you just simply have to destroy the crop. There were not really well-known and effective ways of doing that analytical chemistry to understand what was happening in the crop, to be able to help the producers with the timing of when they could harvest the crop. And so not only did we have to think about ways of developing new varietals of hemp to help reduce THC, but we also had to have ways in which we could measure it accurately, quickly, and provide that information back to the producer. And so that was really a mix of different researchers and scientists getting together, thinking about the chemistries of the soil, what was happening with the plants themselves and their varieties, how that THC concentration changes in the plant's growth cycle, and then ultimately being able to measure that accurately and get the results back in a quick manner.
We've got some links that K-State's been doing some research on it. They've done a lot of research down at just south of Wichita there, where they've really tried to get into the CBD. And problem with industrial hemp is that in order to produce that CBD, you've got to control the pollen, and that pollen is out there in all the native forms, and there's a lot of costs into going into this. It's just finding seed, being able to acquire the seed, get it produced, get it to grow. It's a lot more intense than most people realize. There's not any herbicides available, so finding ways of making that work are different. The whole fiber industry is different, and I don't know where they go with that. A lot of that will be logistics, determining where you can sell that. You better find a market before you start putting it in the ground, because that is the key to all this. And it doesn't matter what crop you grow, whether it's hemp or any crop. I think really knowing that you have a market is pretty key before you go putting it in the ground, whether it's sunflowers or corn or wheat, or especially as you get into the specialties. You really need to know where your market is so you can control your costs and know where profit is.
That's a whole new ball game. I know I've been on field days where we a year ago where we looked at people growing the industrial hemp, and there's some restrictions they got to use. Of course, the oil they get from that is primarily what they're marketing at this point, and it's evidently got a lot of health benefits. Again, but they always got to check that concentration in the plants of the THC level. If it's too high, then they got to destroy the crop. So they're checking that. But their varieties been grown around the state. I know states, I think it's Kentucky's been doing this for quite a while, and we've had speakers come in. So there's it's become an alternative crop in some places, but usually the acres at any given place is not real high necessarily. I think there's a lot of unknowns that in terms of, like with any crops, you grow a crop, sometimes you get weeds. Well, what sort of weed control can we do in a situation like that when you're growing a broadleaf crop? So I know they have some issues, but there are people trying to raise industrial hemp. But like I say, this, you go back to World War II, hemp was grown in the state of Kansas for the fiber. But right now, that's not a real big market. It's more for the oil that's produced from it.
It's one that, a year ago we consulted on quite a few acres of hemp in 2019. 2020, that number has just plummeted. And it's plummeted not because there's not an interest in industrial hemp, not because there's not an interest in the byproducts of it, but because the production of hemp greatly exceeded the capacity for the industry to process it. And they found themselves in an oversupply situation almost overnight. It really made growers rethink how many acres to put into hemp. Do I have a contract in place for the processing of it? Do I have an outlet for it once I get ready to harvest it? And what I think we're going to see is we're going to see a right sizing of that industry to match the production capabilities. Will it increase? Absolutely. Will it take over, will it knock wheat and corn out of the top acreage spots in Kansas? Probably not anytime soon, just because there's just not that much demand. But if we can find an equilibrium where production can match the capacity to process, then it's a great option for farmers to have, especially as you go further west. You get in some water limited areas, and it just gives them one more option to have in place for a kind of a crop rotation scheme.
There are many risks involved with growing industrial hemp, from lack of insurance to limited locations to manufacture the crop into a useful product for the public to use. What are some of the troubles industrial hemp growers face?
When we first started growing in 2019, people not mocked us, but they had very derogatory comments towards what we were doing. Now we have so much community support. So many people are coming up and asking, how is your hemp crop? How are you doing? How are you guys continuing to move this forward? So that has been very neat to see that shift in perspective. For me, it's education. I'm 30 and I don't remember any time in my life that marijuana has not been considered negative. The last time Kansas did any research on hemp was in the 1970s. Kansas State that was the last published research that they did. So a majority of the people now just have not been around it. Hemp was integral to the success of World War II and the Hemp for Victory campaign slogan that was going on. Farmers were required to grow so many acres of hemp during that time. And then afterwards, it kind of got grouped in with marijuana and became more of a negative connotation.
It's marijuana, that's the stigmatism, and it's not the same thing. We like to kind of compare when people ask if you take a pepper and you have a jalapeno pepper or you have a bell pepper. Yeah, they're both peppers, but they are not the same thing. And that's the thing that we've really tried to educate people on and really work on, is knowing that this is a very, very good crop, a beneficial crop, and that the negative stigmatism does not need to be tied to this industrial hemp crop.
So we farm a little over 2,000 acres, and we have corn, wheat, soybeans, and a little bit of milo. My background is actually crop research, and so I have been a research scientist for the last 8 years. I help develop new products, new varieties, and new genetics for farmers for commercial farming. So we grow hemp now, but along with all those other crops.
A lot of people talk about needing to buy specialized hemp planters and equipment, and it's not true. That's what we're trying to get across with making this a regular agricultural crop. We just used our 1240 case planter, planted this 15-inch centers. I went across it one time, came back, split my rows, went across it again. Used regular milo plates. It worked out fairly well for us. It wasn't perfect, but it got the job done. We're happy. We'll probably make some changes next year to try and get it closer to perfect. So we just wanted to share a little bit about that as part of our deal, and part of our mission here is to just make this another agricultural crop that any farmer can grow. We will be using a modified stripper head, which is going to come in and strip all the flower off the plant and leave us with the stalk, and then we'll come back in and swath and bale the stalk.
The biggest challenge that you find with growing hemp is having an outlet. This isn't a crop that you can just take to the co-op, drop it off, and get your check. You have to figure out what the manufacturer wants, what stage that he would like his crop harvested at. You know, if you're growing for fiber, if you're growing for seed, if you're growing for CBD. Those are three very different products that you're getting from this plant. And so having an outlet and knowing where you're going has really been the biggest challenge for us.
Growing the infrastructure and growing that end user, that demand for it, getting people to realize that it's worth investing in. It's not cheap right now to invest in it, but I think in the long run, it will be worth every bit of it. Just like your typical hemp clothing and stuff has that stigmatism of being way more expensive than a cotton t-shirt. Well, that is true right now, but I think that barrier is closing, and if you can consider the benefits, you know, that closes that gap even more.
Now that our plants have started flowering, we are taking cuttings every week and helping determine where the THC levels are in terms of our CBD. You are wanting to maximize your CBD content, you know, so if that's what you're growing for. And so we will not harvest our CBD plants till we get around 0.25, 0.28 THC. So we're still under the legal limit, but we're maximizing what the crop can do for us. It really just has to do with your genetics in terms of CBD percentages. Here in central Kansas, we have a very unique problem of ditchweed, feral hemp. And so if you're growing female plants, you do not want them to get feminized. But here you don't really have that option just because pollen can travel so far with hemp. 10 miles is what they say hemp pollen can travel, and the longest on record is actually 33 miles. So there's no way to control that feral hemp for that amount of area. So you really have to do that when you're working in your budgets, that your female plants are probably going to get pollinated. But you know, if you're growing for fiber or seed, you're gonna have males and females out there. So it's a very interesting dynamic for us.
This operation here inside the greenhouse and our outside grow for our CBD varieties is a lot of work, lots of manpower, lots of labor-intensive time. My wife spends a lot of time out here in the greenhouse and in the outdoor grow. The fiber field down south is really what we're aiming towards in the long run, making it more of a conventional style farming crop, less man hours, basically, you know, planting, cultivating, harvesting, your typical crop.
When we first planted these, we waited and waited and waited for them to, we didn't think they were coming for at least a month. And then all of a sudden, we started adding some nitrogen and water, and we just couldn't believe how fast they grew. This plant will use water similar to corn. What do we say, 17 inches total in the whole season we'll use on this plant. All the plant gets used. We will use every bit of it, from the seed, flower, to the stalk. And in some cases, which we won't be doing, but in some cases the way they're even harvesting the roots to use the roots for fiber products.
Because of the risks involved in growing industrial hemp, many producers have chosen not to participate in the production of the crop, leaving a possible industry open for those who are willing to take the leap into the industrial hemp growing field. With all of the risks involved, what are some of the benefits of growing industrial hemp?
You know, it's another source of a cash crop, another source of an income. And more pros is they talk a lot about being sustainable. Well, these plants are way more sustainable than trees. You know, you can make anything that's made out of trees with this plant, and you can grow it faster. A tree takes 8-9 years to get a tree worth harvesting. Well, you can grow the same amount, or you can do more in an acre of hemp than you can an acre of trees by far, and this is every year.
It's very sustainable. We don't really like to use the word replace certain things, because we're not trying to replace industries, just trying to enhance or maybe subsidize them a little bit. anything that's made out of petroleums and plastics that are non-biodegradable can be made from hemp, which is very biodegradable. Biofuels, same thing. The forest industry is a big thing in the world, and we can maybe help subsidize that a little bit and be a lot more environmentally friendly, I guess.
Well, the one main difference is the plant size. CBD, we're focusing on growing the flower and a high CBD content. With the fiber, we're looking for a lot more of the stock to make fiber products with the bast and the hurd. Plus, this is a dual crop where we can get CBD and fiber off of it.
There's 50,000 documented, I guess, or known uses or products that can be made out of this crop. That's the thing, is that there's so many uses for it and so many different avenues that can be taken with this crop. So the limit is really endless if you really look at it.
So in terms of CBD, we actually created our own line of products. We are continually working, but we've got oils, salves, hemp hearts, and then CBD honey. So by creating our own outlet, we don't have to worry about selling our isolate or distillate or biomass to an extractor. We can kind of control that market for us. In terms of fiber and grain, that is still a developing market for us. We are still working to finalize where that crop's going. So it's been kind of a roller coaster this year. We thought we had an outlet lined up. It didn't pan out quite how we were hoping, so we're hoping to develop something even better.
Our thought process in that is that number one, we're trying to keep expenses down because there's not a lot of room in there. We don't just want people out there just selling our stuff and not knowing what they're talking about. We're really educated driven and data driven, and that's what started our retail product, is that people came to us and wanted a viable, trustworthy product. That they wanted to try CBD, but they had CDLs and had to pass, DOT drug tests and stuff, and they were scared that that product might interfere with that. So we decided that we could provide that and provide the data and provide the testing to show that our products are safe, and you can do that. So we really kind of try to keep it in-house as far as distribution goes, just so we know we can control the quality and the educational side of things. It hasn't been a problem to get it out there. We just really keep a close tabs on that, I guess.
The biggest thing with hemp is there's such high risk involved because it's such a new industry. So we really don't encourage anyone, even ourselves, to grow more than you can afford to lose. And so last year we did 1,500 plants, CBD plants that you can see in the background here. And then we did 80 acres of a fiber grow. This year we have 1,500 plants out here again. And then we also put 55 acres underneath an irrigated pivot for a fiber and grain variety.
No one really knows what the future will bring for producers of industrial hemp, but for those who are willing to take the gamble, there could be a bright outcome. So what are the hopes for the future of industrial hemp in Kansas?
We really see fiber and grain being an integral market here in Kansas because farmers can use the cropping rotations that they already have. They can use the equipment that they already have to implement this new crop. And so moving forward, we want to see another outlet for farmers to have an opportunity for a new cash crop. It's no secret that the ag economy right now is not great. And so if we can provide another outlet for farmers, that would be a dream come true. We also really believe in sustainability. And so if we can get some of these products like hempcrete and hemp wood, anything made of paper or plastic can be made with hemp. So if we can start seeing the manufacturing of those products and breaking into the existing industries that are already out there, that would be a dream come true. Manufacturers aren't going to build multi-million dollar processing plants without a ready supply from farmers. Farmers aren't going to put crops in the ground until they have a place to go with it, that they're confident those contracts are going to go through. So that is really the biggest hiccup that we're in. Thankfully, we continue to surround ourselves with good people in the industry that have experience, that are kind of mentoring us through this process, and we have a lot of passion and drive, and so we see it coming to Kansas, and we see it coming in the next few years, and we just hope we can continue moving this forward. It's risky, you know, the break-even margins are tough in farming anyway, so I know that there's not a lot of wiggle room for people looking to grow on scale industrial hemp like we want to do, and like we're doing. So if you're gonna get into it, make sure you take the time, you find a good resource for your seed to help you through this growing season, kind of what to look for. We love helping people that are getting into the industry. There's no reason for you to experience the same problems we had if we can help you do that. So I'm gonna say yes, it's a good time to enter into the industry, but wade cautiously into the water. There's a lot of people that jumped headfirst last year and that aren't growing this year because it's more work than what they expected. Take the time to vet who you're working with. You know, ask questions, and if you don't feel comfortable moving forward with that person, don't be afraid to break off and go a different direction. Don't be afraid to ask for help from people that are in the industry, because this is so new, and don't be willing to grow more than you can lose, because there is no guaranteed market. Insect pressure is tough, weed pressure can be tough, and so just enter cautiously.
Education is key to informing producers and the public to the positive aspects of industrial hemp and its potential to become a widely used and versatile crop with almost unlimited potential. But only time will tell if more Kansas producers will be able to take full advantage of this multifaceted crop. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Real Ag on industrial hemp. As always, you can check out this and other episodes of Real Ag on SmokyHillsPBS.org. From the producers at Smoky Hills PBS, this has been Real Ag. Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from
the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.